The next concept we're going to look at is known as lists, also sometimes called arrays. And this is similar to the concept of a variable, except instead of storing just one piece of information, we can store multiple pieces of information under the same name. If we have a look at the basic structure and the basic syntax for using lists, this first line here, we just have a name using the same format that we would for a variable, a camel case name, and equals, and then these square brackets. That'll create an empty list. If we wanted to add items to that list, we could use mylist.append, and then in the brackets, whatever we have there will be added or appended to our list. And so here we would end up with two items in our list, or two elements in fact, firstly black caps and secondly all blacks, and both of those of course are strings. If we then use this command print mylist and in the square brackets the number 1, this is actually going to print out all blacks because we can access each element in the list using their index number, and those index numbers start at 0. So if we had mylist 0, it would print black caps, mylist 1 would print all blacks. So to get us started, some fun facts about lists. First of all, the data is stored sequentially, so the order in which the elements in the list are stored is important. You can store multiple data types, so the elements in your list don't all have to be the same. You can have a mix of string, integer, boolean, and so on. It has a name, just like we would with a normal variable, a camel case style name. And as I've alluded to already, each piece of data in the list is known as an element, and each element can be accessed using its unique index number, and those index numbers start at 0 and work their way up. That's why of course it's important that this data is stored sequentially. Lists are mutable, which means that they can be modified, so you can add items to them, you can remove items, and you can change what's stored in the list. If we have a look at an example, this first line of code here would set up a standard list full of integers. So I've got the list name cricket scores with camel case, and all of these integers separated by commas inside the square brackets. Then if I have print cricket scores 0, because this is index number 0, it will print out the number 12. 2 would therefore be 0, 1, 2, so it would be 21. You can see here the index numbers lining up with the elements in the list. So pause this video now and create some lists of your own. Experiment with printing out different index numbers and seeing how a list works. Okay, so welcome back. We're going to have a look at a couple of new things for lists. One thing we can do is modify the elements. So if we start with the same list we had before, and we have this following line of code, cricket scores, and then in the square brackets 3 equals 5, we're going to overwrite the element that's in position 3, index position 3, which of course is 0, 1, 2, 3, it's the 55, and we'll replace that with 5. So if we print them all out, we're going to get 12, 43, 21, 5, and 22. So you can see that element has changed. If we want to add an element, just like we saw in the first slide, we can use this .append method. So we have the name of the list followed by .append, and whatever we want to add to the list in the brackets there. Alternatively, we could also use this plus equals syntax that we're familiar with. So cricket scores, the name of the list, plus equals, and then in square brackets this time, the element we want to add to the list. We can also make use of the len function to work out the length of a list, and this can be applied to other objects as well. So the len function finds the length of whatever is inside the brackets. As an example, if we had print, then the length of the hello string, it's going to count the number of characters in the string and then return 5. So this would print out the number 5. Similarly for our list here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements in the list. So if we print the length of cricket scores, we're going to get the number 6 coming back. One thing to take note of is that the highest index number in this list is 5, because we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the length of it is 6, because there are 6 elements within it. So now we're going to create our own example of adding to the list, and I've created an empty list here called cricket scores, just like the previous example. And I'm going to set up a loop that's going to repeat until there's 4 elements in the list. So I'm going to use a while loop for this. and I'm going to say while the length of cricket scores is less than 4. We're going to repeat whatever is in this loop. And what I'd like to do is cricket scores.append. So remember, that's the syntax for adding something to our list, and we need to put whatever we want to add into these brackets here. And just like we'd normally do, we're going to have an input function, and I'm going to say enter a score, and make sure I match my brackets, so I've got 2 at the front and 2 at the end. Then outside of my loop, so back and unindented, I'm going to print cricket scores. Okay, so if I run this program now, it's going to ask me to enter a score, so I'll just enter a few random scores here. And you can see now, once I've entered 4 elements, the length of cricket scores is no longer less than 4. So we're going to end this loop and go down and print out the result, and you can see it prints it using a similar syntax to how we define the lists themselves. One thing to note here is I didn't actually change this input to an integer, so you can see here you've got the quote marks around these numbers which indicate that they're strings. It's probably a good idea to change these to integers so that we can use them in calculations later. Say we want to work out the average score or the maximum score or the total score overall. So just like before, we add the int function around it. And now if we run that one more time, you can see our output looks slightly different this time. In fact, they're just integers rather than strings. So have a go with that with your own example. You can change the type of loop you're using, you can change the condition that you've got up here. You might even want to use a while true loop, and then you could ask the user to continually enter numbers until they were ready to quit. So you could ask them if they wanted to continue, and then you could base your loop on that. Have a play around, see what you can get working, and then we'll come back and have a look at some more ideas with lists in the next video.